Hey guys, tonight we slip into sandals that don't quite fit, feel the fine grit of ancient dust between our toes, and make our way down a torchlit path to a place most people never imagine as sleepy, the original Olympic Games. You'll see, athletes smeared in olive oil and sweat, hear crowds roar in a dialect lost to time, and feel the tension of bare feet digging into packed earth as the race begins. But don't worry. You probably won't survive this if you take it seriously, because they sure didn't make sports easy back then. Think less friendly competition, more death-adjacent cardio. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this sleepy little channel reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through a grove of olive trees under a dusky pink sky. The ground is dry and cracked, and cicadas are screeching somewhere in the background. In the distance, you see flickering torchlight gathering around a wide dirt track. Welcome to Olympia, 776 BCE, give or take, though historians still argue whether that date marks the true beginning or just the first one that someone bothered to write down. There's no stadium seating here, just carved stone, dusty embankments, and the occasional goat tied to a post. But the place is buzzing. You slide into a crowd of sweaty, sandal-footed spectators, your tunic damp in the summer heat, and try not to trip over someone's picnic of figs and wine. Tonight's event? The Stadion Race, a short foot race of about 600 feet. It's the oldest event, literally the blueprint for the entire Games. And while it may seem, well, boring to our modern eyes, no hurdles, no photo finishes, no inspirational slow motion. Montages. Back then, it was the main attraction. You glance at the starting line. There's no flashy gear, no shoes, just men standing barefoot, rubbing dust on their skin to help with traction, knees bent like coiled springs. Some are noblemen, others farmers. They all look like they could snap you in half just by flexing. One guy sneezes and punches his own chest as a warm-up. You're intimidated. Now the starter raises a long stick called a balbus, and everyone hushes. Then he lowers it. The runners explode forward, sand spraying behind them. The crowd roars. You hear someone next to you gasp, "That guy's got Hermes in his blood." Probably not true. But when someone moves like that, anything feels possible. You watch as the winner crosses the finish line in a blur, his chest puffed, arms raised. No medals are given, just a crown of olive branches, cut from the sacred tree of Zeus with a golden knife. Honestly, still a better prize than most participation trophies. But you're not done yet. Just when you think the crowd's about to head home, torchbearers appear. It's time for the Lampadodromia, a nighttime relay race with fire. That's right, fire. Each runner carries a torch, and the goal is to pass it along without letting it go out. So, essentially, it's a race and a trust exercise with open flame. What could go wrong? You find yourself muttering under your breath, "This is how towns burn down." But no one seems concerned. The runners take off, flames trailing behind, them like meteors, lighting up the grove with dancing shadows. The flicker of fire, the gasps of the crowd, the wild cheering, it's chaotic, beautiful, and just a little dangerous. And through it all, you notice something. There's no clapping. Instead, people stomp their feet or slap their thighs. It's louder that way, and weirder. Later, back in your makeshift lodging, a threadbare mat in a shared tent that smells faintly of goat, you try to drift off. But sleep doesn't come easily when your neighbors are arguing over which runner had divine ancestry, and someone nearby is drunkenly trying to recite a victory poem from memory. You think about that stadion race. Just one sprint, no gimmicks, yet it carried the weight of national pride, religious duty, and yes, even politics. The winner's name would be remembered. Not his trainer, not his rivals, just him. And for that reason alone, you start to understand the appeal of running half-naked across a dusty track under the judgmental gaze of gods and mortals alike. Also, let's not pretend, part of the appeal was showing off. Even in ancient Greece, there was no shame in flexing, literally. As you finally roll over and shut your eyes, you wonder how much harder the other events will be. Spoiler, a lot. But that's tomorrow's problem. You wake up to the unmistakable sound of hooves and shouting. Somewhere outside your tent, a man is yelling about a missing wheel. Another is arguing, loudly, with what sounds like a horse. You stretch, sore from sleeping on the hard ground, and peek through the flap. Today, it's chariot racing, and not the kind you imagine from Hollywood. No clean uniforms or organized lanes. This is dust, danger, and a solid chance someone's going to be launched headfirst into a wooden post. You shuffle your way toward the hippodrome, the massive race course built just for these events. It's not exactly a high-tech arena. Think long oval track, packed dirt, dangerously close spectators, and a layout designed by someone who clearly hated safety. As you settle into a spot near a cluster of fig merchants, you take a look at the competitors. The chariots come in pairs, pulled by teams of 4 horses, tethripon, each animal twitchy with energy, their nostrils flaring like steam vents. But here's the kicker. The people who win, they're not the drivers, they're the owners. Usually rich aristocrats too dignified or too smart to risk their own necks. So they hire charioteers, often slaves or professionals with nothing. To lose, to do the actual racing, you know, the ones who might die. Casual. It's like sponsoring a Formula One team, except instead of champagne showers and photo ops, your driver might get trampled by his own horses. The race begins with a trumpet blast, and the air instantly fills with dust, screams, and the thunder of hooves. The chariots surge forward, wooden wheels clattering, drivers leaning back with all their weight as they whip the reins. You can barely see anything through the chaos, but you hear it, a collective gasp as one chariot clips another. The wheel splinters, the horses panic, the driver is thrown violently into the dirt. He's alive, you think, but only because the others somehow missed running over his head. And yet, the race continues. No one stops. No penalties. It's just part of the game. You wonder if the gods are watching, and if they're mildly amused or absolutely horrified. At the turn of the track, the Nyssa, things get really hairy. This is the most dangerous part, the sharp corner where the chariots must pivot at breakneck speed. Some try to cut too close and end up crashing. Others go wide and lose ground. The perfect line, that's the stuff of legends, literally. One famous charioteer named Diocles supposedly won over 1,000 races, but historians still argue whether those records were exaggerated by his fan club or his PR team, assuming he had one. You glance around. The crowd is into it, really into it. There's cheering, betting, laughing, and the occasional fight. One guy is waving a baked eel like a victory flag. Don't ask. The race ends in a blur. One team crosses the finish first, barely, and the horses rear up triumphantly. The owner, who hasn't broken a sweat, steps forward like he did something meaningful and accepts the olive wreath. He raises it high, grinning, while his driver limps off somewhere with a dislocated shoulder and a new appreciation for not being dead. You think about how weird it is that so much ancient honor could ride on someone else's spine. But that's how the world worked. Appearances mattered. Glory was transferable and survival was optional. Afterward, there's a lull. People drift off to grab snacks. Roasted chickpeas, figs, maybe a flask of wine mixed with herbs that somehow smells like both honey and something that's gone bad. You wander toward the stables, where the horses are being rubbed down. You hear snippets of gossip. One team had magical horses. Another bribed the starter. Someone swears they saw a charioteer throw a curse tablet onto the track. Typical. You lean against a sun-warmed wall and close your eyes, imagining the moment of takeoff. That snap of reins, the lurch forward, the mix of speed and total lack of control. It's terrifying, it's beautiful, and it's also completely bonkers. No helmets, no harnesses, just hope and horsepower. There's a saying floating around, only fools and heroes ride the Tethrapon. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Nearby, an older man is telling a group of wide-eyed kids about the time Heracles invented the whole race by taming wild horses using just a loud shout and an uncomfortable stare. You smile. Probably. Not true. But you also weren't there. So, maybe. You walk back through the now quieting grounds, feet sore, ears still ringing from the chaos. And as the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the field, you realize something oddly profound. Chariot racing wasn't just a sport. It was a spectacle of risk, control, and pure dumb luck. The kind of thing people watched, not in spite of the danger, but because of it. You sigh, grateful not to have been invited into the driver's seat. You would have lasted 4 seconds, maybe 5 tops. You brush some dust from your sleeve and head toward a nearby well to wash your face. A donkey is drinking from it. You consider whether it's rude to interrupt. The donkey looks at you. You decide to wait. Tomorrow's event? Running in full body armor, because clearly jogging half-naked wasn't challenging enough. Your legs already ache just thinking about it, and you haven't even started moving. The sun is barely up, but the air is warm, thick with the smell of sweat, bronze polish, and last night's wine still evaporating off the track. Today is the Hoplitodromos, the race in full armor, and when they say full, they mean it. Helmet, shield, shin guards, and about 50 pounds of gear strapped to your unfortunate body. You shuffle toward the starting line alongside a group of men who look like they bench-press donkeys for fun. They're greased up, intense, and mostly ignoring the fact that sprinting in bronze-plated shin splints might liquefy their knees. You pick up your own shield, round, heavy, and absurdly large. It's not even your size. No one's is. These aren't custom-fitted. They're just issued. You slip it over your left arm, adjust the strap, and it promptly pulls your shoulder down 2 inches. Great start. Nearby, one guy is doing squats in his armor. Another is muttering a prayer to Nike, the goddess of victory, and also possibly footwear. You tighten your sandals, the leather already stiff with dust, and try to convince yourself this is fine. It's just a short dash, about 2 stadia or 400 meters. No big deal, Except it is, because in full hoplite armor, every step feels like walking through honey wearing an iron couch. The trumpet blares. Everyone stiffens. You crouch slightly, trying to balance the shield so it doesn't smack your thigh on launch, and then go. You lurch forward, shield wobbling, helmet sloshing. Slightly because it's too big, dust kicks up instantly, clouding your vision. You can barely see the guy in front of you, but you can definitely smell him, like olive oil and terror. Your feet slap the packed earth, sandals sliding slightly with every push. The crowd roars, loving the sheer ridiculousness of it. People don't come here to watch smooth athleticism. They come to see you try not to fall on your face while wearing a mobile bronze kitchen. A man next to you stumbles. His helmet shifts over his eyes, and he veers off course. His shield clips yours, and you both wobble dangerously. But somehow you stay upright. You offer a quick, "Sorry," which is not historically accurate, but you're a modern soul trapped in an ancient mess. Eventually, the finish line appears, thank the gods, and you lunge across it, gasping, dragging your gear behind you like a broken cart. You collapse to your knees, chest heaving, and try not to throw up. The winner is already being hoisted onto someone's shoulders, holding his shield aloft like a massive dinner plate of glory. You lie back in the dirt and stare at the sky, vaguely wondering if your ancestors were trying to kill themselves with cardio before war even started. That's the real purpose of the hoplitodromos. It was military training disguised as sport. Sprinting in armor mimicked battlefield maneuvers, where soldiers had to run to position quickly before stabbing things, or being stabbed. It was all about preparing for chaos, under pressure, while sweating out 3 pounds of salt. Historians still argue whether the runners carried their spears during the race. Some sources say yes, others say that's a later addition. But either way, you're glad your hands were free. One more item, and you'd have tripped over your own ambitions. You roll over, groaning, and catch sight of a boy polishing his father's helmet, watching the race with wide eyes. He looks thrilled. You remember that excitement, when battle and sport looked the same, and every contest felt like a path to immortality. It's hard not to admire the spectacle, even as your back screams and your calves twitch involuntarily. These men, many of them farmers or fishermen in the off-season, trained all year just for this moment. Not for fame, not for money, but for a crown of leaves and a name etched into collective memory, and of course for bragging rights at the symposium later. After the race, you stagger toward a shady spot under a fig tree, where a few other competitors have collapsed. One is fanning himself with his shield. Another is just lying face down, groaning into the dirt. You all look like sunburned turtles that lost a bet. A musician starts playing a soft tune on an aulos nearby. 2 flutes played at once, strapped to the face, like some sort of ancient musical octopus. The sound is reedy, a bit eerie, but oddly soothing. You close your eyes and let the notes drift over you like a breeze. Someone mumbles, "At least it wasn't the pankration." You shudder. That's coming. And you are absolutely not ready. You open one eye and see a small altar nearby, smoke rising from a burnt offering. The priests sacrificed a rooster before the race, supposedly for victory. You're not sure how much the gods care about poultry, but hey, it's tradition. As the sun climbs higher and the crowd begins to disperse, you peel yourself off the ground, still dragging your shield. A local boy offers you a cup of watered wine, and you accept it like it's liquid gold. The wine tastes like regret and figs, but it does the job. Tomorrow, the long jump. Except, it's not really a jump. It's more like a leap of faith. With hand weights. Because clearly jumping on your own wasn't weird enough. You wake to the sound of flutes again, soft, dreamy, and for a moment, you think maybe you've died and this is Elysium. But no. You're still dusty, slightly bruised from yesterday's shield-flailing sprint, and someone just stepped on your foot. Back to reality. Today is the Halma, the long jump. You might be picturing a modern track and field event, a smooth, clean runway, maybe a sand pit, neat chalk lines and judges with clipboards. Absolutely not. Here you're looking at a patch of raked earth. Uneven, dusty, and sloped just enough to trip you if you're not careful. There are no shoes, no socks, and certainly no wind-measuring devices. Instead, you've got 2 lead, or stone weights, halteres, in each hand, and a vague promise that swinging them correctly might launch you farther into the air. You pick up a set. They're heavy, maybe 5 pounds each, curved like elongated donuts with handles. You roll one in your palm. The idea is to use them to build momentum. Swing forward as you leap, swing back as you land. That's the theory anyway. The result? Usually a face full of dirt. A competitor lines up at the makeshift starting point, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. He begins his approach, halters swinging in rhythm. 1 step, 2, a third, then jump. He soars briefly, arms flung forward, and lands with a grunt. His feet dig into the soil, and he tumbles into a roll. The crowd applauds politely. Someone calls out a distance in Greek that you don't quite catch, but it sounds unimpressive. You step up. The halteres feel awkward. It's like trying to leap while holding grocery bags filled with rocks. You swing once, twice, then dash forward, plant your feet, and launch. Time slows. You feel the pull of the halteres as you arc forward. The air rushes past your ears. For a second, you think you're flying. Then you're not. You slam into the ground, knees jarring, dust exploding in your face. Your landing's more of a squat than a stick. Still, better than yesterday. You cough, wipe grit from your eyes, and trudge out of the pit. An older man in the crowd shouts something about form. Another is arguing that the ancient jumps were way longer, 20 feet or more. Historians still debate whether those records were exaggerated, or if the athletes used tricks like multiple small jumps, or a technique lost to time. Maybe they just had really good breakfast. Nearby, a jump master adjusts a bronze rod used to mark distances. No laser sensors here, just a stick and a decent memory. You sit on a nearby stone bench, halters resting beside you like sleeping turtles. A kid picks one up and nearly drops it on his foot. You help him rebalance it and tell him not to try jumping with it unless he wants a mouthful of gravel. It's strange. This whole event feels more like a ritual than a sport. There's music playing again, a slow rhythm that some athletes match as they swing the weights. Some say the flutes help with timing. Others say it's just background noise to distract you from how ridiculous you look flying through the air like a startled goat. One jumper wears a small charm around his neck, shaped like a dolphin. He kisses it before every leap. Superstition is rampant here. Some athletes rub oil on their thighs in a specific pattern. Others only jump with their left foot leading. You don't ask why. You're too busy trying not to tear a hamstring. Later you catch sight of a mural near the gymnasium depicting an ancient jumper frozen mid-air, legs extended perfectly, halters flung forward like he's about to toss them at an enemy. He looks majestic, graceful, nothing like you. You wonder whether that image is realistic or just artistic propaganda. Some scholars believe the halteres genuinely helped athletes jump farther by shifting their center of mass forward. Others argue they were mainly symbolic, a way to show strength even if they didn't improve distance much, like lifting dumbbells while trying to vault a fence. You try again. This time, you focus on rhythm. Step, step, leap. Swing the weights forward just as your feet leave the ground. For a moment, it clicks. You land cleanly, upright, and a small group claps. You feel oddly triumphant. Not Olympian, maybe, but less of a disaster. You hear a tale from one of the trainers. Some athlete once jumped so far, the priest overseeing the event declared it divine and shut the competition down for the day. You're not sure if that's apocryphal or just an excuse for everyone to knock off early and drink. As the competition wraps up, the top jumper is led around the field, olive wreath already being braided. He doesn't look smug, just tired. His hands are chalky, his feet caked in dirt. He bows slightly to the crowd, and someone throws a fig at him. A compliment, you think. You drop your halteres off in a pile of battered weights, some with initials carved into them. You recognize none. They're the ghosts of jumpers past, men who probably also fell flat on their backs at least once. On your way out, you pass a group of younger boys imitating the jump with sticks in place of halteres. One falls dramatically and rolls down a small hill, groaning theatrically. Everyone laughs. You laugh too. Because if you're going to throw yourself through the air with rocks in your hands, you might as well enjoy it. And as your muscles start to seize again, you remember tomorrow's challenge, the pankration, ancient Greek MMA, no rules, no gear, just fists, pride, and the occasional dislocated everything. You sigh. Maybe you can fake an injury. You awaken with the grim awareness that today you might die. Not in a metaphorical, oops, I tripped during a hurdle way, but in the, that guy's trying to twist my head off way. Welcome to the pankration. There's no real English equivalent for this event, though ancient no-holds-barred fighting gets close. The Greeks loved it. A brutal blend of boxing and wrestling, the pankration had exactly two rules: no biting and no gouging the eyes. That's it. Everything else, fair game. You sit at the edge of the arena, watching as two competitors, already slick with sweat and olive oil, circle each other, muscles twitching, eyes locked. The crowd is murmuring, but not loudly. This isn't a raucous event. It's intimate, tense, like watching lions size each other up in a sand pit. One of the fighters lunges. The other ducks, swings a fist into his opponent's ribs, then drops low and hooks a leg. They go tumbling, limbs tangled like a mess of angry snakes. The crowd leans in. You do too, despite yourself. The match continues for several minutes. No time limits, no rounds, just until someone taps out or doesn't. That's the terrifying part. Surrender was allowed, in theory, but some fighters never got the chance, or chose pride over practicality. Historians still argue whether deaths in the pankration were rare accidents or more like acceptable sacrifices to entertainment. Some ancient texts hint at fatalities being shrugged off, while others describe them as scandalous. Either way, broken noses and shattered fingers? That was Tuesday. You shift uncomfortably as a healer jogs across the sand, carrying what looks like a basket of herbs and a bandage roll the size of a papyrus scroll. One of the fighters limps off, blood trickling from a gash on his temple. The other raises both hands, triumphant and panting like a boar. Your name's been called. You freeze, laugh nervously, look around for an excuse, maybe fake a sudden divine vision, blame a twisted ankle, but no. You walk into the ring, dust clinging. To your legs, mouth dry as a Spartan joke. Your opponent is enormous, not just tall, wide, a wall of meat and malice. He grins, revealing a missing tooth, and cracks his knuckles loud enough to scare off birds. You remember the basics. Stay low, keep your elbows in, don't let him get behind you, and under no circumstances should you end up in the lion's clutch, a full-body grapple where your spine turns into philosophical debate. The referee, a gray-bearded man with the cheerful energy of someone who's seen too many bones snap, gives a nod. Begin. You circle. He feints left. You flinch. He laughs. Then he charges. You duck, barely, feeling the whoosh of air as his arm swings past your head. You jab at his ribs, more for show than damage, and step back. He comes again, this time lower, and your legs give out in the scramble. Sand fills your mouth. You roll. He follows. There's a moment where you're both tangled, and it's hard to tell who's in control. You find yourself face down, arm twisted at a questionable angle. You squirm. He tightens. You consider tapping out. But then you remember the olive wreath, and the fact that people are watching, and also the mild chance he's going to nap later, and you want to say you lasted longer than 2 minutes. You twist hard, elbowing backwards, and hear a satisfying grunt. He loosens. You escape. Back on your feet barely, you manage to land. A knee to his thigh. Not elegant, but effective. He stumbles. Then, something miraculous happens. He slips. It's not much. Just a foot catching in a patch of softer dirt. But it's enough. You seize the moment, rush forward, and tackle. You both go down, but you're on top now, arm around his neck, heart pounding like a war drum. You squeeze. He fights. But then, a tap. You blink. Did that happen? You look at the referee, who raises a brow. You look down. Your opponent exhales sharply and nods once. You won. You roll off, gasping, not sure whether to laugh or cry. The crowd cheers. It's not deafening, but it's real. A kid throws a laurel branch at you. It bounces off your shoulder. You catch it on the second try and wave. Someone hands you a cloth to wipe your face. You realize your lip is bleeding, and your right eye is already puffing up. But you're upright, and technically alive. You feel like you've been hit by a war chariot, but a victorious war chariot. As you hobble back toward the athlete's shade tent, an older competitor claps you on the back hard enough to nearly dislocate your spine. Not bad, he mutters. For a first-timer, you grin through the pain. Thanks, you say. I've always wanted to be punched in the soul, he laughs. Wait until the final round. That's where the real pain lives. You don't respond. You're too busy wondering whether there's any wine left. Later, as twilight softens the edge of the day, you lie back on a worn mat, listening to the crowd drift away. The smell of roasted lamb wafts in from the vendors' stalls. Your bruises throb gently, like a lullaby played with mallets. You can't help but admire the madness of it all. The Greeks believed sport was more than entertainment. It was preparation for war, an offering to the gods, and a way to test the limits of the human body. You've tested yours, extensively. And now? You're halfway through the ancient Olympic gauntlet. Ahead lies even more absurdity, equestrian chaos, synchronized spear hurling, and a chariot race that might actually kill you. You close your eyes and smile. Let the gods bring what they may. Your ribs ache like they've been used as a xylophone by an angry satyr, but morning waits for no one, especially not injured semi-champions like you. You rise gingerly, joints cracking like the start of a bad thunderstorm, and shuffle toward the hippodrome, the great track where today's action takes place. It's time for the equestrian events. Now don't picture the Kentucky Derby. There are no tidy hats or bugles here. This is chaos in a dust bowl. The hippodrome stretches longer than your attention span, a colossal loop where horses thunder in clouds of sand, chariots rattle dangerously, and riders clutch reins like their lives depend on it, because to be clear, they very much do. Your first task? The Keels, a simple horse race. Simple in the way a manticore is a simple cat. You mount your horse bareback, no saddle, no stirrups. Just raw thigh strength and the desperate hope your horse likes you today. You can barely believe you're here. Only aristocrats usually enter equestrian events. Horses are expensive, so are broken limbs. But a spot opened up last minute. Some noble's nephew pulled a hamstring sneezing, and you were volunteered. Probably as a joke. But here you are, on a horse named Erebos, which means darkness. Charming. You line up beside a row of other competitors, most of them lean, confident, and glaring at your slouched form. You smile awkwardly. One spits near your foot. Friendly bunch. The trumpet sounds. Erebos bolts. You clutch the reins like a lifeline. Knees clamped around his flanks, trying not to bounce off like a sack of old amphorae. The wind slaps your face, dust blinds you. Somewhere behind, a man is yelling, either encouragement or a curse, possibly both. You round the first turn, somehow still attached to your horse. Two riders ahead of you are already fighting for the inside lane, elbows jabbing, one letting out a war cry that sounds distinctly theatrical. Another rider tries to pass on the outside and nearly clips the curve. His horse stumbles. The crowd gasps. You focus. Lean forward. Trust Erebos. He seems to know what he's doing, which is more than can be said for you. 1 lap. 2. Your thighs burn. Your teeth ache, your hands are blistering, but you're holding on, and somehow gaining. You and one other rider break ahead, neck and neck. You glance sideways. He's older, scarred, with eyes like flint. He bares his teeth, you bare yours right back, like you're some kind of wild centaur. Final lap. You grit your teeth, whisper something incoherent to Erebos. Maybe encouragement, maybe a plea, and urge him forward. He responds. The crowd erupts. You don't hear them. All you hear is the pounding of hooves, your own heartbeat, and the tiny, irrational thought that you're enjoying this. You cross the line just ahead. Not first, but not last. Somewhere in the muddled middle, triumphant in your own sweaty, terrified way. You dismount, or rather, fall off, and kiss the dirt. Erebos nudges you, then trots off like this was just another Tuesday. You limp to the side and collapse onto a bench where a boy offers you water. You chug like a man who's seen Hades and lived to tell the tale. Later that day comes the real insanity, the tethrapon, the 4-horse chariot race. Yes, 4 horses. Yes, 1 chariot. Yes, you didn't sign up for this one. But your performance earlier impressed someone enough to offer you a tryout, or maybe they just lost a bet. Either way, you're now gripping a wooden handlebar inside a chariot barely wider than a doorway, surrounded by 4 impatient horses who seem to hate each other. And you. The chariot is light, rattly, and feels about as stable as a cart built from popsicle sticks. The horses snort and stamp, already jostling before the start signal. You remember hearing that wealthy owners used to hire professional charioteers for this very reason, because it was incredibly dangerous. One bad turn, and you're flung like a discus into the dust. Historians still debate whether chariot drivers were celebrities or expendables. Some were slaves given a rare shot at glory. Others, professionals with fan clubs. All of them, undeniably, had questionable self-preservation instincts. The race begins with a thunderclap. Dust explodes. The chariots surge forward, wheels spinning. In perfect, or utterly chaotic, sync. You grip the reins like your life depends on them, which again, it absolutely does. The first lap is pure panic. You're trying to steer 4 separate minds with 1 set of reins, while also not flipping the entire contraption into the outer wall. You lean into the turns. The crowd is screaming. Horses are whinnying. Someone crashes behind you with a sound. Like an amphora being smashed by the gods, you keep going. Somewhere in the madness, you find rhythm. The horses settle. You stop praying with every breath and start to think, maybe, just maybe, you can make it to the end intact. A charioteer to your left shouts something you don't understand and tries to cut you off. You swerve right, nearly grazing the post. That marks the turn. The chariot groans. A wheel wobbles, but it holds. Final lap. You urge the horses forward. They respond with one last burst of speed, manes flying, hooves hammering the dirt like thunder. You're flying, truly flying, and for a moment, you feel invincible. You don't win, but you survive. And in this event, that's arguably more impressive. As you limp away, again, you overhear an old man near the track say, "Back in my day, we didn't need 4 horses. We ran beside the chariot." He might be exaggerating, but it wouldn't surprise you. You return to the athlete's quarters sore, shaken, but secretly exhilarated. You've ridden bareback, driven a lunatic chariot, and somehow remain mostly in one piece. Your bruises now have bruises. Your inner thighs feel like they've been beaten by titans, but your spirit, weirdly energized. Tomorrow brings javelins, discoy, and the pentathlon's final tests, but for tonight, you sleep like a stone under a fig tree, still hearing the distant thunder of hooves in your dreams. You wake up with straw in your hair, and a mysterious smear of fig on your cheek. Someone's goat is chewing a corner of your tunic. You blink at it. It blinks back, unfazed. This, apparently, is your life now. The sun is already warming the stone around Olympia, and you've got a full day ahead. Today is for the real athletes. Not that charioteers and pankration warriors aren't athletic. But today belongs to the all-rounders, the pentathletes, the ancient overachievers, and yes, somehow, you've been roped into that too. First event, the long jump. You wander toward the sandpit, only to realize something's a bit off. The competitors aren't just running and leaping, they're holding things. Stones. No, bronze weights. They're called halteres, and yes, you'll be using them too. The long jump here isn't what you know from modern track and field. It's part hop, part swing, part interpretive dance with weights. The idea is to hold the halteres, maybe 3 or 4 kilos each. Swing your arms dramatically as you run, then launch yourself forward like a startled squirrel. Just a really jacked squirrel. You take your place. The officials, stoic as ever, nod for you to begin. You grip the halters, run hard, swing, and leap. You soar, briefly, beautifully, and then promptly land face first in the sand. Not quite a disaster, but also not quite graceful. One of the officials records your distance with a stick. Another hands you a damp cloth for your dignity. You try again. This time, you manage a slightly better arc and land on your feet. The crowd claps politely. You feel like a philosophical metaphor, slightly off balance, possibly misunderstood, but determined. Historians still argue about how exactly ancient long jumping worked. Were athletes jumping multiple times in a row? Was music played during the jump to help rhythm? One theory claims jumpers were accompanied by a flute player, which frankly sounds like something out of a sitcom. Regardless, the halteres seem to help with momentum, or maybe they just look cool. Who knows? Next, the discus. This one feels familiar. You've seen it in vase paintings. Muscular men mid-spin, body twisted like a pasta noodle, discus frozen, in dramatic flight. What you didn't realize was just how heavy the thing is. Nearly 6 pounds of bronze, with the aerodynamics of a stubborn pizza. You step into the throwing circle, grip the discus, and give it your best whirl. It wobbles through the air like a drunk seagull but lands decently far. You nod, proud. The official grunts approval. Another competitor sends theirs nearly double your distance, but you pretend not to notice. Discus wasn't just about strength. It was grace, too. Form, rhythm. The ancient Greeks were obsessed with balance, physical, philosophical, and literal. And you, flailing like a startled chicken? Well, you're working on it. Onward then to the javelin. This time, you're feeling confident. It's basically spear throwing. How hard can that be? You're handed a wooden spear with a leather thong attached, called an ankyle. The idea is that this little strap increases spin and distance when used correctly. That's the theory anyway. You run, you throw. The javelin twirls sideways and lands pathetically about 10 feet in front of you. Someone coughs. You glare at them. You try again, adjusting your grip. This time it flies straighter, farther. Still not a record, but no longer embarrassing. The ankyle slips off mid-flight and nearly hits a judge, but he doesn't even flinch. You suspect he's seen worse. There's debate among scholars about whether ancient javelin events focused purely on distance or if accuracy was also judged. Some say targets were used. Others think it was all about technique. Either way, you're mostly relieved no one lost an eye. By now, your tunic is soaked with sweat. You've thrown, leapt, and spun your way through 3 grueling events. And now comes the fourth. Wrestling. Again. It's different from the pankration, thankfully. No strikes allowed here. This is the classic pale, pure grappling. First to 3. Falls wins. Your opponent is younger than you, faster, and grinning like he knows something you don't. He does. He knows wrestling. You lost about a minute before being flipped onto your back like a startled turtle. The crowd cheers, mostly for him. You grunt, reset, and try again. You manage a lucky sweep that catches him off guard. 1 fall apiece. Then, he throws you again, somehow using only his pinky, it seems. Final round. You give it everything. Momentum, sweat, desperation, and one very legal toe trip. He goes down, 2-2. Final fall. It's a blur of limbs, dirt, and muffled grunts. At some point you end up with his leg in a questionable angle and just push. He topples. Victory is yours. You collapse in the dirt, dazed, and stare at the sky like it owes you money. The crowd, perhaps sensing your near death, applauds warmly. A boy offers you a fig. You eat it without sitting up. Sweet, slightly squashed. Perfect. 1 event left. The stadium foot race. You drag yourself to the starting line. It's not far, just about 200 meters. A straight dash from one end of the stadium to the other. No turns, no tricks, just pure speed. You look down the dusty lane, flanked by marble markers. Ancient footsteps echo here. Real champions once. Stood where you now stand, you swallow hard. The trumpet sounds. You run, your legs scream. Your lungs burn. Your feet slap the dirt like drum beats. You're not fast. You're not elegant. But you're moving, and at this point, that feels like victory. You cross the line. Somewhere in the middle again. But standing. Breathing. Uprightish. You've completed the ancient pentathlon, not as a champion, but as a survivor, and honestly, that's starting to feel even more impressive. As you slump to the side, pouring water over your head, you overhear 2 old scholars arguing nearby. One insists that the pentathlon was created as the ultimate test of balance and harmony. The other says it was just a way to sell more olive oil. You smile. Both might be right. Tonight, there's feasting, singing, maybe even a fire juggler or 2. But for now you close your eyes, sprawled on a stone bench, and let the sun lull you into the softest, most earned nap of your short, heroic life. The feast begins before the stars appear, but it stretches long into the night. You limp your way to the communal grounds, where the smell of roasting meat hits you like a chariot to the senses. Spiced lamb, grilled fish, honey cakes, even the olives seem fancier tonight. A man with a harp plays something vaguely triumphant as you sit beside fellow athletes, some wrapped in linen bandages, others still giddy with victory. One has a laurel crown and is using it to chase off flies. Another is asleep with his face in a fig pie. A herald calls for attention. His voice cracks halfway through, and someone throws a grape at him in solidarity. Awards are announced. Champions step forward, faces half humble, half smug. There's no gold or silver here, just olive wreaths, handmade from the sacred tree of Olympia. Simple, but somehow grand. The crowd applauds, chants names, pounds the earth in delight. Your name is not among the champions. And yet, people nod toward you. A few clap your shoulder. One whispers, "That second wrestling fall? Art." You smile. Small victories. Eventually, The wine flows more freely, and stories begin. Tales of past games, legendary feats, and half-truths wrapped in heroism. You learn about a man who won the stadium 3 times and celebrated by eating 50 eggs. Another who supposedly ran so fast his sandals caught fire. Historians still argue whether that last one is metaphor or just terrible shoe craftsmanship. You lean back, full and sore, and stare at the fire. Sparks rise into the dark like miniature stars. Someone nearby is humming. Someone else is arguing about which god favors javelin throwers. You mumble something about Hermes' calves and drift off for a moment until a friendly slap on the back brings you back. It's your old friend, the one who convinced you to enter these games in the first place. He's beaming, carrying 2 mugs of diluted wine. "You didn't die," he says. "You lift your cup." Yet, he tells you you've been signed up for tomorrow's exhibition match. You blink. Exhibition of what? He doesn't answer, just grins. The next morning, groggy but still alive, you find yourself at a smaller arena near the edge of the Olympic grounds. This isn't the main stadium. This one's dustier, quieter, where stranger contests are held. Events too weird or too unofficial for the main program. They call it the exhibition ring, but it's more like a sandbox for creative violence. You're not alone. A few dozen athletes gather here, most of them nursing bruises or still half drunk from last night. The crowd is smaller but no less enthusiastic. Today's event? A revival of an old favorite, the hoplitodromos, the race in armor. You groan audibly. You're handed a bronze helmet, a heavy round shield, and a pair of shin guards that haven't been polished since the last century. The idea is simple. Run. A full stadium sprint while wearing a full panoply of battle gear. Nothing says athletic grace like hauling 20 pounds of metal in the noon sun. You line up. The others around you grunt and adjust their gear. One has a shield clearly too large for his body. Another's helmet slides down past his eyes. You can barely lift your legs. Trumpet. Dust. Pain. You charge forward, shield bouncing against your hip, helmet rattling with every step. The sound is deafening, like a thunderstorm made of kitchenware. You pass one runner, whose shin guard has fallen off and is now hobbling like a confused stork. Another trips entirely and rolls into a bush. You don't stop. The finish line is a blur. You lurch across it, gasping, dropping your shield with a thud that shakes the ground. You finish 4th. You also finish covered in sweat and approximately 3% blood. But it's yours, so it's fine. You're awarded a stale piece of bread and a knowing nod. It feels like victory. Later, someone mentions other forgotten events. One, called the Apobates, involved leaping off a moving chariot, running beside it, then leaping back on. You laugh until you realize they're not joking. It was real. And sometimes even done in full armor. Historians still debate whether Apobates was more of a military exercise or a genuine competition. The art suggests grace. The records suggest broken noses. Then there was the Pol Marcos Challenge. Less. An event. More a showcase. Athletes would climb a rope, then wrestle on top of a tall pole. No records survive of winners. But the losers? Probably still falling. There's even a rumored Olympic event involving synchronized torch dancing. You don't ask. You're starting to see that the Olympics weren't just about physical prowess. They were about absurdity, spectacle, and yes, entertainment. The line between ritual, sport, and comedy was blurrier than your vision after yesterday's chariot crash. In the quieter moments of the day, you wander Olympia. past the temple of Zeus, where a statue the size of a mountain looms over pilgrims, past the altars stained with years of sacrifices, blood and olive oil side by side. You pause at the Zanes, the statues paid for by fines levied against cheaters. They stand solemn and stern, little warnings in bronze. Cheating, it seems, was not unheard of. Athletes bribed judges, coaches gave signals. One even tried to poison a rival's wine. You can't help but chuckle. Some things never change. You sit beneath a fig tree again, that same one where your journey began. It's strange to think just days ago, you were a nobody with a borrowed tunic and a half-formed idea of what Olympic glory meant. Now, you're a nobody with a limp and a story, and sometimes that's better. The wind shifts. You hear another trumpet. More events are beginning. Somewhere, a runner is psyching himself up. Somewhere else, a discus is wobbling through the sky like a misfired pancake. You sigh happily, you're not done yet, but for today maybe just one more nap. By now you move like a cracked statue, graceful only in memory. Your muscles creak, your feet revolt at the idea of sandals, and even your fig tolerance has hit a suspicious plateau. But there's something else in your stride today. Confidence? Madness? Hard to say. The exhibition event sparked something. You find yourself strangely drawn to the fringes, the half-remembered, the barely sanctioned, the almost sports that made up the weirder chapters of Olympic lore. You begin asking around. At first you're met with shrugs, then with winks, and eventually with a whispered invitation. You arrive at dusk, led through olive groves to a clearing that smells faintly of roasted garlic and ambition. Here, unofficial events are held away from the prying eyes of officials and philosophers. These are games for the brave, the bored, or the slightly concussed. Tonight, it's time for the artistic strength challenges. Think less Greco-Roman, statues and more. Strongman cabaret. The first event, stone lifting. Not the tidy, weight-balanced kind with calibrated discs and barbell collars. No, this is just rocks, big ones, misshapen and rude. The crowd cheers as competitors grunt, their way through lifting increasingly absurd boulders. You're handed one shaped like a sleeping walrus. You squat, mutter a prayer to Heracles, and hoist. It rises, not high, but enough. Enough to elicit a cheer. Someone shouts, "Poseidon's plumber." Possibly a compliment. You're not sure, but you bow anyway. The next challenge, holding a jar of wine at arm's length for as long as possible. You chuckle. How hard could that be? Very 2 minutes in, your arm is trembling, sweat running down your elbow, your wine threatening to slosh. A small boy in the crowd starts humming a dramatic tune just to mess with you. You break at 2 minutes and 12 seconds. Not bad, not great, mostly painful. You slink back into the crowd as another man, a blacksmith by the look of his shoulders, holds his jaw like it's made of feathers. Show off. Between events, a traveling storyteller steps up and begins to recount the tale of Theoxenos of Tenedos, the forgotten fist. Supposedly, he once defeated 5 opponents using nothing but his glare. Historians still argue if he existed, or if he was just the result of bad translations and wine-soaked exaggeration. Another event is announced, the one-legged race in armor. You pretend not to hear. Instead, you find yourself chatting with an older athlete, Someone who's been coming to Olympia for decades. His beard is braided with silver thread, and he smells like olives and wisdom. He tells you about the old event known as the Kotabos. Technically not an Olympic sport, but sometimes held during post-game symposia. It involved flinging dregs of wine from a kylix, that's a shallow cup, at a target, usually while reclining. That's not a sport, you say. He shrugs. It is when there's betting involved. Apparently, elite Greeks would train their wrists to flick just right, striking bronze discs or floating saucers with astonishing precision. Some even claimed it revealed character, romantic fortune, or whether you'd fall asleep first at the party. You try it. Your wine splatters the dirt. The old man pats your shoulder. You'll get there. Later, still intrigued, you hear rumors about another long-lost event. The Skeptramachia, staff fighting. It wasn't in the official Olympic roster, but city-states often trained soldiers in it. It was part dance, part duel, part giant stick. Slap fight. Think fencing, but with more bruises and fewer rules. You're offered a staff. You accept. Your opponent is nimble, fast, and disturbingly good at hitting you in the shin. You whirl, block, jab, and even manage a fancy spin that ends with you flat on your back and laughing. The crowd applauds. You pretend the fall was choreographed. After the match, someone wraps your wrist with cloth soaked in vinegar. It stings. You pretend it doesn't. A young poet approaches, having watched your last 3 disasters with what you hope was admiration. She asks if you'd like to try her event. Poetic sprint, she says. You raise an eyebrow. You run while reciting epic verse, she explains. Mess up a line, and you're out. Stumble, and you're disqualified. You stare. She shrugs. It's popular in Thebes. You agree. Mostly because walking feels impossible, so why not run? You're given a few lines from Homer to memorize. Easy stuff. Dactylic hexameter. Or as easy as ancient Greek poetry gets, which is to say, not. The race begins. You sprint, reciting, your voice bouncing awkwardly off your steps. You mess up line. 3. Trip over a goat and fall into a bush of suspicious herbs. Your dignity remains in the dust. She claps anyway. The poet helps you up. Better than last year, she says. You beam. That night, over dried figs and tepid water, you hear murmurs of an event even stranger than the rest. The cheese run. Held by certain Spartan offshoots, it involved chasing a wheel of cheese down a hill. The first to catch it, or survive the descent, won the cheese and the bruises. You vow to find this hill. But not tonight. Tonight, you watch the stars rise over Olympia. You realize something. The real Olympics, the polished version, everyone remembers is just one layer. Beneath it lies a messier, funnier, more human layer of improvised events, clumsy traditions, and stories only half true. And yet, they feel more real. You stare at the fire, surrounded by limping athletes, dusty poets, and sarcastic blacksmiths. You don't have a wreath, but you have this, and somehow it's better. Morning finds you stretched out beneath a fig tree again. The leaves above filtering in soft speckles of sun that feel like Apollo himself is tapping you on the forehead saying, "You up yet?" You grunt, shift, and realize. Your legs are not entirely under your command anymore. Every muscle is staging a silent protest. It feels like someone stuffed your joints with gravel and made you sleep in a barrel. And yet, you smile. You've heard whispers of another curious footnote from Olympic history, one that's not about physical might or weird contests involving dairy. No, this one's about scandal. A figure named Kallipateira. Her story has floated around the games for generations. A rare tale of a woman stepping into the male-dominated arena of Olympia. According to the tale, Kallipateira disguised herself as a man, complete with beard and coach's robe, to sneak into the stadium and witness her son compete and win. In her joy, she ran onto the field to celebrate, and accidentally revealed her identity. Scandalized, the judges debated punishment. But since her father, brothers, and now son had all been Olympic champions, she was spared. Historians still debate whether she was brave or reckless, or even real at all. But one thing is agreed upon. After her incident, coaches were required to attend future games naked. You ponder this over breakfast. Just another reminder that the ancient Olympics were not a static institution. They changed. They evolved. They got awkward. You limped toward the old practice fields, where today's unofficial exhibition is more cerebral than physical, though just as intense. It's the rhetorical match. Two athletes face off in a verbal contest. Each is given a topic, usually something absurd like why goats are superior to horses in battle, and must argue their side while the crowd votes by clapping, whistling, or falling asleep. You volunteer as judge. The first speaker is passionate, loud, and uses the word hoof efficiency more times than you thought possible. The second is calm, clever, and quotes a satirical philosopher named Hipponax. It's close. But you award the win to the calm one. The loud one sulks but later buys you a honey cake. No hard feelings. Later, a trainer tells you about another almost event from ancient times, the Elliptes Challenge. Elliptes were the men who massaged athletes with olive oil, scraped off the sweat and dust and skin, and applied healing salves. According to legend, there was once a contest to see who could prepare an athlete the best, judged by sheen, scent, and how fast the athlete could slide across marble. You blink. He grins. Slipperiest wins. You politely decline when he offers. To demonstrate. By midday, you're drawn to the altar of Nike, where athletes pray not just for victory but for clarity. You overhear two competitors arguing. One says victory is the point. The other claims the struggle is the real prize. It's strangely moving. You wander to the base of the hill where sculptors are at work, carving tributes to athletes, some long dead, some very much still nursing bruises nearby. You find a half-finished statue of a runner, face frozen mid-effort, muscles tense in eternal sprint. A sculptor notices you staring and says, "They never tell you statues hurt more to pose for than the race itself." You ask if you can try. You stand awkwardly for several minutes, mimicking the pose. Your calves scream. You collapse. Everyone claps anyway. Someone tells you about another forgotten event, only held once, the silent lyre. It was an attempt to combine music and meditation. Competitors would play an invisible lyre with total focus, while seated cross-legged in the sun. Whoever stayed still the longest and looked the most convincing won. You try it. You last 12 seconds before you sneeze and whack yourself in the face with your imaginary strings. You return to the main square of Olympia, where people mill about trading stories, dates, sandals, and occasionally insults. You hear about another ancient oddity, synchronized running. Apparently, a few Greek city-states experimented with pairs of runners tied together at the wrist, dashing in unison. It was called dromos symphonos. Historians still argue whether it was a sport or a punishment. You and your poet friend give it a shot. You tie your wrists and jog. The first few steps are elegant. Then you trip on a goat. Again. That evening, a group of athletes gather for a makeshift reenactment of the boule, a mock version of the Council of Elders. They argue about which mythical hero would win in an all-out wrestling match. Achilles, Odysseus, or, wildcard, Atalanta. The debate is loud and deeply unproductive. Atalanta wins, mostly because no one dares argue with the enormous woman dressed as her, who may or may not be holding a real javelin. As the fire crackles and dusk creeps in, you find yourself at peace, not just tired, but fulfilled. You've scraped, slipped, sprinted, and sung badly. And through it all, you've uncovered a side of the Olympics that no marble monument ever shows, the silly, the strange, the deeply, wonderfully human. One last event is whispered about, a midnight run, not for prizes, not for glory, just because the moon is out, the air is soft, and sleep feels overrated. You join without question, barefoot, quiet, you, and a handful of dusty dreamers jog the edge of Olympia, laughter trailing behind like fireflies. No one wins. No one needs to. You stop at a ridge, panting, and look out over the quiet fields. In the distance, torches flicker. Somewhere, someone snores. You smile. You came here for greatness. You found weirdness. And honestly, that's better. You wake to birdsong and aching feet, the scent of campfire smoke still clinging to your tunic. Your body complains in languages it didn't know before, but your mind is clearer than it's been in days. The Olympic grounds, so intense during daylight, feel gentler now in the soft hours of morning. Today's energy is quieter, more contemplative. You wander toward the gymnasium, the training ground, now empty except for a few scattered sandals and a lonely dog napping in the shade. The echoes of athletes' past efforts seem to hum in the walls, grunts, cheers, thuds, all hanging in the warm breeze like memories too heavy to leave. A young boy approaches, barefoot and bright-eyed, carrying a small scroll. He hands it to you, without a word. It's a list, clumsily written, full of crossed-out names and strange doodles. At the top, it reads, "Events that should exist." You laugh. Among the entries, melon balancing, silent sprinting, backwards wrestling, and best toga flare. You pocket the scroll. Inspired, you spend part of the morning inventing your own absurd events with a handful of other wandering spectators and over-eager children. Soon you've got a full-on fake Olympics underway. Your personal event? Stealth. Discus. You have to throw it silently. You succeed in hitting a tree. The tree wins. Another child suggests an event called Slow Javelin, a game in which the winner is whoever throws the javelin the least impressively, but with the most elegance. Think figure skating with a spear. You twirl, you stumble, you bow. You receive a daisy crown for your performance. Somewhere between pretending to sword fight with walking sticks and judging an air flute solo, you begin to notice something. This is the spirit that glued the Olympics together for centuries. playfulness blended with pride. Even in their most serious expressions of strength and beauty, the ancient Greeks never fully abandoned their flair for the dramatic, the theatrical, the occasionally ridiculous. It's then that an older man, part philosopher, part drunk uncle, wanders over and declares he's reviving the ancient art of ankle poetry. You ask no questions. Apparently, during certain banquets in forgotten city-states, the names of which he pronounces differently each time, revelers would compose couplets based on the shape, calluses, and hairiness of a guest's ankles. You offer yours. He studies, mutters, and recites. Twists like a vine on Dionysus' gate. This ankle's rhythm foretells your fate. It makes no sense. You applaud anyway. Later, resting in the colonnade's shade, a woman tells you of another half-remembered tale, the Whisper Games. These, she says, were held unofficially during the sacred truce, when all warfare between city-states paused for the Olympics. Young messengers would be trained in breath control and clarity, then sent running between temples, delivering prayers or secrets without being overheard by rival listeners. Speed mattered, sure, but so did subtlety and staying unremarkable in a crowd. Historians still argue whether the Whisper Games were real or a metaphor dreamed up by sophist poets, but it's stuck in your mind. You try it later, whispering a message to a friend across a crowded food stall. It ends up in the ears of a goat, not your best work. Around midday, the crowds gather again, not for another contest, but for what's known as the Wreath Walk. Winners of events, official or otherwise, parade through Olympia, olive crowns on their heads, surrounded by cheering admirers and a shocking number of impromptu flute players. You walk alongside them, not as a victor, but as something even better, a witness, a participant in stories that never made it to textbooks. You clap for the man who threw a discus blindfolded and only hit 2 people. You bow to the woman who sprinted in a chiton and didn't trip once. You cheer for the poet who somehow rhymed hippopotamus with gymnasium. At the front of the line is an old man on stilts, balancing a tray of figs. No one knows what event he won. No one asks. Back in the stadium, a final event takes place. Not a sport, not exactly a ceremony, but something in between. It's the ode toss. Each person steps forward and delivers a single line, poetic, absurd, wise, or just loud. Then they throw a pebble into a central bowl. The bowl is said to be sacred to the muses. Or maybe it's just a very old salad dish. Your turn comes. You pause, then say, "To sweat is to remember you're alive." You toss your pebble. It lands with a clink. Later, as you sit on the warm steps of a half-collapsed shrine, you reflect on what you've witnessed. Not just contests, but a culture in motion, fluid, flawed, and full of laughter. The forgotten Olympic events weren't always noble or elegant. Some were downright silly. Some were made up on the spot. But all of them, in their own way, honored the core of what the games were meant to celebrate. Effort, expression, and just a touch of madness. You lean back, looking at the evening sky, the clouds rolling in like sleepy spectators. Somewhere nearby, someone's still playing a silent lyre, probably badly, and you think, maybe there's one more event left in you, just after a nap. You wake from your nap to the scent of roasting barley and sweet herbs, fennel maybe, and the distant echo of someone attempting a triumphant trumpet blast. It squeaks mid-note and ends in embarrassed laughter. You don't even question it anymore. Stretching beneath a sun-warmed pillar, you realize today marks the final day of the games. Not the final day of your journey. There are still stories to stumble through, but the atmosphere has shifted. There's a strange electricity in the air, a mingling of fatigue and excitement, like the last hour of a festival before it dissolves into memory. People are gathering for a peculiar event held only at the end, the Games of the Forgotten. It's an unofficial contest to recreate, through guesswork, half-baked reenactments, and pure chaotic improvisation, events that supposedly existed in ancient times, but whose rules were never fully recorded. The first reenactment? Something called the Anthrodromia, flower race. No one knows how it was played. Theories vary wildly. Some say competitors raced to pick the most flowers. Others think it involved arranging petals in poetic patterns while sprinting. A few believe it was entirely metaphorical, and that the real race was against emotional vulnerability. Whatever it was, today's version includes tunic-clad men and women galloping through the olive groves, arms filled with wildflowers, chanting confused rhymes. You are somehow roped into judging the floral aesthetic, despite having no floral expertise whatsoever. You give the win to a girl who added dandelions to her crown because they're stubborn like me. She beams. You feel like Zeus in flip-flops. Next up is the Corybantic Hop. Named for the ecstatic dancers of old, the event's rules seem to involve leaping from one foot to the other while balancing a shallow bowl of wine on your head and singing, badly. You watch as grown men flail with all the coordination of startled flamingos. One manages 4 hops before tripping over a sandal and launching his wine directly into a judge's beard. A goat steals the empty bowl. You give full points for flair. Nearby, an older man reenacts a supposed Spartan challenge, standing motionless, while holding a heavy bronze helmet filled with sand on his palm. To simulate endurance, he says. 10 seconds in, a bee lands on his nose. He doesn't flinch. You suspect he might actually be a statue? You learn of another strange, possibly mythical event, nocturnal javelin. Held by moonlight, competitors would hurl javelins toward a torchlit target with their backs turned, judging distance by sound alone. Historians still argue whether it was real or just a training game gone very, very wrong. Tonight's version involves soft spears made from bundled reeds and someone yelling, "Left! No! The other left!" as blindfolded throwers pivot uncertainly. The torch target ends up extinguished by a wildly thrown sandal. Everyone cheers. As twilight deepens, a quieter activity emerges, the lament of the losers. Not an official event, but a beloved tradition. Athletes who didn't win or even finish gather to tell their tales, not to shame themselves, but to celebrate the attempt. One man speaks of his failed sprint, where he tripped at the starting line and somehow pulled a muscle in his face. A woman recounts her botched wrestling match, where she accidentally head-butted her own foot. Another simply says, "I showed up. That's enough." You're invited to share. You consider your own record, mediocre stealth discus, failed whispering, and a very enthusiastic but doomed performance in best toga flare. You how? Stand and say, "I came for glory. I found sandals full of olives. I regret nothing." The crowd laughs softly, kindly. Someone hands you a small laurel twig. You look around and realize how much this oddball community of misfits, tryhards, old champions, and wandering poets has grown on you. No medals, no eternal fame, just stories and smiles and the knowledge that someone once invented goat sprinting and meant it. Later, while sipping watered wine beside a crumbling statue of Hermes, whose foot has been mysteriously replaced with a melon, you overhear a group debating a new addition to next year's Games of the Forgotten. Underwater running, one says. Invisible torch relay, another adds. Competitive napping, someone yawns. You lean in. You'll need a referee. They all nod solemnly. You're hired. As night settles fully, the festivities turn into music and clumsy dancing, the kind that makes your bones ache, but your soul loosen. And then someone appears with a scroll, the list of all unofficial events from the week, every name, every odd challenge, every joyful disaster. Your name is on it. Beside it, someone has scribbled, Champion of the Almost. You fold the scroll carefully and tuck it into your sash. You'll keep that one. The stars above Olympia seem closer tonight, more curious, as if they too lean in to listen. You lie on a worn wool blanket beneath a grove of olive trees, the sounds of the Games of the Forgotten now a gentle hum behind you. Somewhere, someone's still playing a double flute out of tune. It's comforting, oddly, like a lullaby written by a goat herder with confidence and zero musical training. Your limbs are sore, your sandals wrecked, and your heart unusually full. But sleep doesn't come yet, not quite. Because tonight, under the stars, comes the last shadowed layer of the ancient Olympic experience, the myths around the events that never made it past rumor. You've heard whispers all week about contests too strange, too dangerous, or too divine to be officially recorded. Some historians call these stories exaggerated, the products of drunken poets and competitive liars. But others suspect they held some truth. You decide to go myth hunting. First, the tale of the Trial of Echoes. This event, according to a traveling storyteller with 7 teeth and a talent for dramatic pauses, was held only once every 50 years, and only at midnight. Contestants stood at the edge of a sacred gorge and shouted philosophical statements into the void. The goal? Get the gorge to echo your words back with clarity. The deeper the idea, the clearer the echo. If the gorge gave you silence, your soul needed work. Historians still argue whether this was a real location or whether the gorge was metaphorical. Some think it was actually a nickname for a particularly blunt judge. Another tale, the chase of Hermes. Allegedly, a masked runner representing the god Hermes would dash through the city at dawn, dropping coins and riddles. Anyone who caught him got to keep what they found. But Hermes, being the trickster god of athletes and thieves, often led them into elaborate traps, like looping circles around market stalls or goat pens. Tonight, a group of children plays their own version in the shadowy alleys behind the bathhouse. One wears a bronze helmet way too big for his head, yelling riddles like, "What has 1 leg and 2 left feet?" before dashing off. You almost chase him. Almost. Then there's the Flight of Icarus race. Not a real flight, of course, but a sprint. Down Olympia's steepest hill while wearing absurd, makeshift wings. The catch? The wings must be built from natural materials only. Leaves, twigs, cloth, and pure delusion. Participants are judged not just on speed, but style, costume, and how theatrically they crash at the bottom. This event is entirely banned now. But a few brave souls, and one particularly loud drunk, seem to be setting it up again tonight. You spectate, holding a torch as they race. One runner's wings catch fire. It's quickly stomped out. He yells, "I meant to do that," and bows. You applaud. Another strange myth, the Hades relay. This supposedly required runners to carry a torch while reciting funerary hymns backward. The finish line. A circle of stones said to be sacred to Persephone. Drop your torch? Disqualified. Say the hymn wrong. You invite the underworld. Most scholars reject this as fantasy. But tonight, someone draws a circle of pebbles near the shrine. Ruins. A torch is lit. No hymns are recited backward, but people take turns walking solemnly around it, whispering secrets into the flames. You join them. What do you whisper? That's between you and the stones. One final myth lingers in the air. The contest of the silent roar. No one agrees on what it was. Some say it was a wrestling match held in complete silence. Others think it was a meditative contest, where athletes tried to generate inner strength so fierce it made observers weep, without moving a muscle. Whatever it was, it gave rise to the phrase, "He roared without a sound," which became a favorite among philosophers who like to sound deep while drinking wine. You try it now, sitting in silence, tensing your body, focusing every ounce of your being inward. Nothing happens. A cat walks by and yawns dramatically. Fair enough. The myths fade into stories. The stories fade into quiet. The quiet becomes a comfort. You begin walking slowly through Olympia's sleeping ruins. Columns like ghostly ribs in the dark. Statues whose features look softer by moonlight. You swear one nods at you. You pass the wrestling ring, now just packed earth and forgotten sandals. You pass the bathhouse, its waters still warm from the day's sun. You pass the empty stands where thousands once cheered, now just stone benches, holding nothing but time. You find a spot beneath the temple of Hera, lie down, and stare up through the cracked beams of a long-collapsed roof. The stars blink back. You think about all the events, the real, the half-real, the invented, the chariot crashes and silent discus throws, the goat races and poetry duels, the sweaty heroics and the beautiful failures. You realize something strange. You don't remember who won most of them. You remember who made you laugh, who tried with joy, who stumbled, stood up, and took a bow like they meant to fall all along. And that, perhaps, is what the Olympics were always meant to hold. Not perfection, but participation. Not gods on pedestals, but humans in motion. Muddy, ridiculous, glorious. You fall asleep before you even notice. The wind rustles the olive leaves. The cat curls beside you. The ruins hum with memory, and in your dreams you win the silent roar. Of course you do. Dawn is just beginning to blush over the hills when the soft chirp of crickets fades into bird song, and your eyes flutter open. Somehow a fig has rolled into your hand during the night. You eat it without question. That's just how mornings begin now. You sit up slowly, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and realize that today marks the ceremonial closing rituals of the ancient games. Not the official farewells of statues and sacrifices, but the quiet, emotional ones. The part no one carved into marble, but everyone carried home. You follow the smell of barley porridge and rosemary toward the main square, where the earliest risers are beginning a slow, swaying dance. Not for performance, for gratitude. They move with the looseness of people who've run, wrestled, leapt, and lost. They nod to each other. They say nothing. You step into the circle, unsure of the steps, but welcomed without hesitation. Left foot, right, spin, muddle through. It doesn't matter. A small boy carries a wooden bowl filled with olive oil, dabbing it gently on foreheads. To remember the gods, he says solemnly. Then adds, also it's really good for dry skin. The dance ends, and an elder steps forward. A woman with arms like tree branches and a voice like gravel stirred with honey. She recites a poem that's both lullaby and battle cry. You catch only parts of it. The dust clung to us like devotion. We bled joy through scraped knees. We shouted our names into time. You applaud. She waves a hand, embarrassed. It's just something I mutter when I can't sleep. A young man appears with a stack of clay tokens, small, circular medallions, inscribed with symbols from the week. Not real awards, but markers of memory. He hands you one with a goat balancing on a discus. You raise an eyebrow. Your signature moment, he says. Fair enough. Throughout the morning, quiet rituals unfold. Athletes walk the perimeter of the field one last time, barefoot, letting the cool earth remember them. Musicians play fragments of songs, half-finished melodies, sweet and a little off-key, like lullabies hummed by forgetful gods. Vendors give away their last offerings. A woman hands you a honey cake and whispers, "Eat this before noon, or you'll dream of losing a foot race to a duck." You eat it immediately. Later, at the temple of Zeus, a large amphora is slowly filled with tiny offerings, ribbons, broken sandals, olive leaves, cracked flutes, poems on frayed papyrus, even one suspiciously gooey date. The amphora is then sealed and buried beneath a slab of stone, not to preserve valuables, but to preserve effort. A time capsule of triumphs and tragedies, both real and delightfully ridiculous. You add your laurel twig, tucking it gently between a torn wrestling sash and what appears to be a homemade goat race champion sash. You hesitate, then add your goat disc token too. The memory is enough. By midday, the arena is nearly empty. You climb to the top of the viewing hill. The same one where you watched your first event, the breath-holding contest, wasn't it? Feels like a lifetime ago. You sit cross-legged in the sun, gazing out over Olympia's crumbling splendor. Below, a few stragglers sweep sand into lines, prepping for who knows what. A child chases a tortoise with a stick, yelling, "You've been disqualified." A statue has been mysteriously dressed in a toga made of lavender bed sheets. You exhale. There's something strange, you realize, about ancient time. It doesn't pass. It sinks. Deep into the soil, the stone, the bones of the place. It waits patiently to be noticed, and once you do, it wraps around you like a vine. Gently, but with purpose. That's what Olympia has done to you. You lie back and close your eyes. The sun warms your face. You can still hear faint echoes, footsteps in sand, laughter in Latin, goats being goats. Someone sits beside you. You don't open your eyes. They say, Tell me one thing you'll take home. You think for a long moment, then murmur that even the silliest games matter when played in full. They don't reply. You peek. No one's there. Of course not. You drift. In this hazy, not sleep, not wake state, you dream of walking through the ruined columns centuries later, your sandals replaced by sneakers, the temples mossy and museum-ready. A tour guide drones in the distance. But the ghosts of your games play on. Soft, silly, sacred, a discus rolls past your foot. You nod to the wind. The final ceremony begins as the sun begins to dip. A simple line of participants, each holding a torch, stands atop the hill. You're handed one too. The flame flickers. Together the torches are slowly lowered into a basin of sand. No speeches, no fanfare, just silence. And then the torches are snuffed, not with water, with breath. Everyone leans in. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. Gone. But not really, not ever. The crowds are gone. The arena's silent. Even the goats have wandered off, bells tinkling somewhere in the olive groves. You wander Olympia's fading edges one last time, tracing the path of what was and maybe still is, if you believe hard enough. The ground still hums faintly underfoot, not from the footsteps of others, but from the weight of memory, compacted like clay beneath sandals and hope. The moon rises early tonight, silver and swollen. A perfect spotlight for a stage now empty. You duck into one final ruin, a modest stone building missing most of its roof. A forgotten training house, perhaps. Inside, faint lines mark wrestling circles and warm-up paths. You run your fingers along the stone wall where someone long ago carved a small image of a man juggling fish. Beneath it, a single word. Why? You laugh, and the sound echoes strangely. Maybe it's less about the why, and more about the because. Because people have always wanted to test themselves, to race the wind, to hold their breath until they see stars, to laugh in the face of decorum, to cartwheel down the sacred hill just to see if they can. You step back out into the night. The ruins are shifting now, softening around the edges. Not literally, don't worry, you're not dreaming. But in that way places do when they know it's time to let you go. When their stories have wrapped themselves around your shoulders like a cloak stitched from other people's lives. You pause at the base of the torch hill. The snuffed-out basin remains, marked only by darkened sand. But as you lean closer, you see tiny sparks within it, glimmers of heat still smoldering deep beneath the surface. Memory doesn't vanish. It simmers. You touch the sand. It's warm. Down the slope, someone has started to pack away the leftover props from the week. A broken wooden discus, several mud-caked helmets, and what looks like a chariot made from 2 wheelbarrows tied together. With goat hair. You help load the cart. No one speaks. No one needs to. Once the final piece is lifted, the cart is pushed into a stone shed. The door closes with a soft thud. It's done, and yet you linger. You walk to the temple of Hera, half cracked and half divine, and sit again where you did before. You expect to feel loss. You don't. You feel full. You feel strangely whole. The stars blink above, and then the wind shifts. You swear you hear it, barely audible, but there, an ancient voice humming the tune from the silent roar. Or maybe it's just your own sleepy breath. You smile. A child runs by with a laurel crown too, big for their head. You pass it on, gently placing it so it doesn't slip over their eyes. They beam like they've just won everything. Maybe they have. A final image settles in your mind. Not a podium, not a statue, but a dusty sandal resting beside a freshly drawn line in the earth. A line that says, "Here. This is where it mattered. This is where it happened. This is where you played. And so, you lived." And just as the wind begins to cool your skin and your eyes finally ask to close, the games of the forgotten whisper their farewell. Now, slow your breath. Let your body melt into the mattress, the pillow cradling your head like soft ancient earth beneath the olive trees of Olympia. The torchlight has faded. The arena is quiet. You've run every race. You've told every tale. There's nothing more to prove. Let your mind loosen now. Unlace the sandals of thought. Shrug off the weight of memory. The drums of competition, once so loud, are only distant echoes now, muffled by the hush of night. Even the goats have gone still. You've given enough. You've been enough. The stars above you are steady, constant. Maybe the same ones those ancient athletes looked up to after their final throws and stumbles. Maybe somehow they remember. Let your breathing become slower, deeper, as if inhaling the warmth of sun-baked stones and exhaling every bit of tension you no longer need. Your limbs are no longer racing. They're resting, heavy, safe, home. And whatever stories you carry, of victory, of missteps, of laughter and silence, they're all stitched gently into the fabric of sleep now. They will hold you through the night, humming faintly like a lullaby carved into marble. So rest easy now. You've seen the forgotten games. You've walked their dusty lanes. You've roared without a sound. And now you sleep.